Good afternoon or good day, wherever you are. This is Balam Cook Solis, and I'm here today with another episode of Power Platform in Higher Ed. Now, even though the things that I will be discussing and I discuss in this particular channel are focused on the applications I have for Power Platform in higher ed for both business and educational processes, I am sure that a lot of these will be useful and applicable to a variety of other scenarios. So in today's episode, actually, I will be bringing you a solution that I built with a specific problem in mind, and that is to create a more inclusive and open culture in our Microsoft Champions program. So today I want to share with you a solution for a problem that we were facing with our Microsoft Champions group here at this large state institution in Texas. We wanted to have a more participatory, community-focused set of engagements with our members, and we wanted them to have a voice. We also wanted them to participate as presenters in our monthly meetings, and we wanted to offer them the opportunity to get some coaching in case they needed to overcome some presentation jitters. So I developed an app that we are going to start using for our next meeting. And I'm going to share with you today the main and most important points of that app so you can replicate it at your organization. But first, here's my intro. Here's the problem that we were wanting to solve. And I always start with problems rather than with just building. Like I said earlier, the main thing we were looking at is to find a way to enhance the sense of community and belonging at our university's Microsoft Champions program, which is a group of distributed users that meets on a monthly basis for our Microsoft Champions meetings. So the solution that I came up with was to create an app that allows our members to, on one hand, ask for the topics that they want us to present on, but to be able to vote on those topics, because sometimes we have been guessing as to what topics they would like to see, and it hasn't always gone right. On the other hand, we wanted to know if there were some topics they wanted to have us address. And finally, we wanted them to be able to volunteer to present if they know or they have done something that they have found useful and have shared it with their teams and be able to share their successes. And in some cases, because we know not everybody's comfortable presenting to a group, we wanted them to have the ability to request a speaker coach or a coach that would guide them through the presentation process so that they would approach the situation more comfortably. I also like to go into defining a number of other things in the applications that we use. So in this particular case, we are looking at two different user types. We have the members of the Microsoft Community Group, and then we have the Champions leadership team, the people that organize and put together all these meetings and that coordinate the process, etc. In this particular solution, I am sharing with you the critical pieces or functions that are part of the solution. We will be working with variables, with containers, with filters. We will use the visible property and the displayed mode property, as well as if statements, and also the left and char or char function. And we will get into those different pieces as we go forward. So let's start with the data structure. I always start with data structures. I think they are the most important things, and I like to build my data structures before I build my app on top of them. So in this particular case, we are going to be using two data tables or two data sources. They are going to be in SharePoint, but you can certainly use any other kind of data table for this case. We are going to be using one data source to save our topics, and we are going to have one to save our votes. And we're going to be establishing a relationship between the topics data source and the votes data source through a topics ID and a votes ID. So here we have an example with this table where an individual submits a topic and submits the month where that will be presented and whether or not, yes, they want to speak, but no, they don't need coaching. We track the user's name and the user ID, other user email, and we use the ID column in SharePoint to keep track of the topic IDs. That is presented via the app to the users, and if a user likes this idea and clicks on it, then the user's vote is registered here with a matching topic ID. This is a numeric ID and it's a whole number. And we keep track of the voter's name, their voter email, and of course we have to register their vote, which is always 1. So this is a one-to-many data structure. Now let's take a look at what our target app looks like. This is an example of the actual app that we are using for one of our meetings. So if you look at the top, we have a label that just encourages people to vote. It uses a dynamic value to capture the month, and it applies it here and also down here, so we don't have to constantly edit the app. And then here it presents the different topics. And if you look at this topic, the like is gray. That means I cannot vote on it. But you can also see, for example, that I cannot see the whole topic here. So if I click on the view, I get a pop-up window that shows me the complete request or the complete proposal. Same thing over here. And if I want to submit a new topic, I will click here, do my topic. I actually don't do more than 128 characters for the submissions, and I offer them feedback as they're filling this in as to how many topics they have used, and they can ask to be a presenter, and they can ask whether or not they're going to be needing a presentation coach. With you, I am going to build this whole app from the ground up. So let's start with our data sources. I did build those SharePoint lists ahead of time, so you didn't have to sit and watch me go through those, but let's take a look at those data lists. So here we have the SharePoint site for this Mayan No-Code Development Corporation. And here we have some examples of things that have been submitted. We capture the title as the topic, who the contributor was, their email. The status has not been filled this, but it will be used for presentations or topics that have been approved. The created by, etc. And the month for the meeting for which they are making these proposals. And here is where we capture whether or not they would like to present and whether or not they would like a coach. So these are the columns. Most of them are single lines of text. Month is the text column, and these are true or false, yes or no type columns. Our votes list has a vote ID, which is a number type column that is created when somebody votes, and it captures the voter name and the voter ID, which are both single line of text, and the votes, which are a numeric 1. Notice that this here is the SharePoint list ID column, but this is not the one we leverage for this project. I created a separate one that matches the vote item that people are voting on the app. So now let's go and start building the app. I am here at make.powerapps.com in my standard Wild West environment, as some people call it. And I'm going to not use the new build experience. I'm going to go ahead and choose to do the old and traditional build experience, starting with a blank app. And I'm going to create a Canvas app, and I'm going to call it with my initial topics voting app. And I'm going to build it as a phone formatted app. Okay, so this is my blank screen, and the first thing I am going to do is rename the screen. And I always start my screens with SCRN, and I'm going to call this the topics screen. Okay, so let's take a look for a moment about what I'm going to do with this screen. In the screen, I'm going to define two variables that are set when the screen becomes visible. So with the screen topics selected, I will go to its unvisible, not unvisible, but its unvisible property, and I'm going to execute two functions. I'm going to set a variable called viewTopic to false, and I am going to set a variable that I'm going to call current month to the text value of today's month. So here at my screen, I make sure the screen is selected. I get my unvisible property, and here's where I declare my variables. Now notice that because the screen in my editor became visible before I added this new property and function pair, the variables have not been set. To set them, I am going to create a second screen, and then I'm going to navigate back to it. That's all. Next, I am going to connect my data sources. I choose SharePoint. And from my SharePoint sites, I choose the Maya no-code developers. And I choose submitted topics and topics votes lists and connect them. That's all there is to it right now. The next thing I'm going to do is build a gallery to hold the topics. So with my gallery here, I'm going to modify it in a couple of ways. I just want to have the title, which is the topic. I'm going to make it a 2-column gallery. Gonna make it a little bit narrower. And then I am going to expand the cell here. Our university colors are in a maroon spectrum, so I'm going to choose a theme for this that has this dark red. Doesn't quite match our color scheme, but for this purpose is close enough. The other thing I like to do is to fill the template cells or the template with a nicer color. So I'm going to use my template fill, and I happen to like the Navajo white color. Okay. And lastly, I do like to have a little bit of padding between my cells. So I'm going to do a padding of 8. And that gives me a nice kind of separation between all of these. I'm going to do a little bit of rearrangement and going to cut away from that so that this doesn't become too long for you. Okay, having done these, having rearranged these, just move things up a little bit. And here are the titles. I'm going to allow the titles to be a little bit bigger, but not too big because I need space for other things. I'm going to turn the right pointing icon to a view icon. And I actually prefer it for it to be darker and with better contrast, so I change it there. The next thing I want to do is to introduce here both my like icon and my number of votes. So I use the thumbs up icon. I need to resize it so it fits there. And then the next thing I need to do is to insert a text label that will hold the votes. I'm going to make that text smaller and centered. Notice if we play this, that we have now the new galleries experience where the currently selected item in the gallery has the text as a bolder presentation as well as a little maroon bar next to it. And with this, we're going to save. So we're going to rename our gallery to keep our good practices going, and we're going to name it GLR Current Topics. This one will be our like icon, and this will be our votes label. This is another label, which we will call label topic. So here come the more interesting parts about this, and that is how do we enable this so that when the user clicks on this, it adds a vote to the votes list. So from there, we are going to remove the select topic. And then we're going to do a patch command. So let's take a look at how that patch command actually looks. So we're going to rename this icon, icon votes. And then we're going to use it to patch a database. So let's take a look at how the function looks so that when we click on the icon, it's on select property, triggers a vote. So this is the structure of the patch command. We are going to execute a patch function on our topics votes list. And because we're going to create a new data item and not update one, but create a new entry, we tell it again defaults and the data source again. And then we're going to create this new record with the item ID. So that's that new topic ID. And we're going to keep track of the user's full name, which we get from the user function here. And then we're going to get the user's email. And then we're going to make the vote 1. Okay, so we have our icon selected. It's on select property. And let's paste in here that function. So again, we are patching. We're patching that data source topics votes list. We are creating a new data line or data record. So we are having to say defaults and again, the data source name. And then we look at the different fields that we are updating and what we are updating those to. So votes ID matches this items, this topic's ID number, the voter's name we derive from the users, and the voter email we derive from email. And then we make the vote for this particular record 1. So what does that look like on the data source? You can see here, this is the votes ID, which we are matching to the topic ID. So if you look at that, that would mean that ChatGPT generation got 1 vote. We're matching this number 1 to this vote. And then the user, who's me, and my email address, and 1 vote. So that's great. How do we keep people from voting multiple times? For that, we are going to change the display mode. So still for the icon votes, it's display mode. We're going to change to disabled. And you see now they're all turned gray. But we want to do this conditionally. In other words, only if the current user has already voted. So that requires an if statement to go into that section. So here is where we change the display mode of that icon. And we start by looking at the topics votes list. And we query that list, or we ask that list, if there are any items where the voter's email equals to the current user's email, and the votes ID is equals to this item ID because the user could have voted on something else. So once we get that subset, we count the number of rows. And if that number is bigger than 0, in other words, has the current person already voted for this, then we will turn the display mode to disabled. Otherwise, we'll keep it as edit. So let's take a look. Okay, so here is, again, what we use to determine whether or not a particular icon in that gallery is enabled for editing or is totally disabled. So we start by filtering across the whole topics list, topics votes list. And we are looking for a subset where the user's email equals to the voter's email, or rather the voter's email equals the user's email, and whether or not the items ID is contained in the votes ID in that table. And if that is bigger than 0, we disable. And if that is less than, or if that is equals to 0, then we allow them to edit. So in this particular case, it looks like the current user, me, has not voted on any of these 2 items. But what are these 1, 2, 3, and 4s? These don't look like votes, and they are not. If we look at that text label, what they are is the item's ID. In other words, the topic's ID. What we want there is to keep a running count of the votes. So let's see how we change that. We're going to delete that, and everything's going to go away. And the label's text is going to be, again, filtering the topics votes list where the votes ID equals the topic ID, that item ID. And then we're going to count the rows, and that's going to return the number of votes. We're going to paste this function there. Relatively simple. Again, we're counting the rows of a subtable where the votes ID equals the current gallery ID. And we're doing that by counting the rows. So let's take a look here. So we have 2 topics that have 1 vote, and we have 2 topics that have no votes. When I click on this, I should see 2 things. The 0 should become a 1, and the like button should become disabled. So there we go. That increased by 1, and now I cannot continue to vote on this item over and over. So we're doing good. Now we're going to start doing something else. We're going to do something that helps us troubleshoot things. We're going to add a text label here just for demonstration purposes. And the item in that label should be the month for which this topic was submitted. And you notice that even though it's July, if I would present this table to my users during this month, they would also be voting on some June topics, which is something we don't want. So what we need to do is filter this gallery so that it only shows the appropriate month's submitted topics. To do that, we go to the items section, and you notice that the items section is pulling all submitted topics. We have not put any restrictions on that. So let's set up a filter that will only show the topics for the current month. Now remember that we declared a variable here that was called variable current month, and that matches whatever month I'm voting in. taking advantage of that, we can create a filter for this gallery that only shows, in this case, July's topics. How do we do that? So we're going to take the items in this current gallery. We're going to filter them where the submitted topics, which is the name of our data source, where the month actually matches the current month. And then we're going to sort them in ascending mode by the date they were created. So keep an eye on this particular section here on the June entry, because right now we're still pulling all items. In the minute I paste on top of that, this function, that June one disappeared. It's still in the database, but we're no longer showing that to the user. So we don't need to constantly be updating the database and removing things that don't belong there. So that's how we keep all those items, only showing the July ones. And that was the only reason I was keeping this text here. So I am going to remove it again because it looked pretty damn ugly. What are some other things we need to do? We talked about in the beginning that this text could be relatively long. So let's make sure that we only show a portion of that, and then we provide our users with a means to see the complete submission. For the label topic text, we are going to modify this item topic, and we're going to ask it to just show us the first 40 characters associated with that particular entry and apply that rule obviously to all the other ones. So this is the function that we will use. We use left of this particular item and how many characters we are going to take from it. And then we're going to add 3 dots at the end. So in this case, I'm going to type it for you. We're going to do left this item topic, and we want the number of characters, which is going to be 40. And we want those 3 dots. And I extend this a little bit to show the 3 dots. So we've gotten that part. How do we get our users to see the full submission? We are going to add a container here, not horizontal or vertical, but your standard container. And we're going to place it over the gallery. I'm going to fill it white and give it a border. Okay, so I made my container white, so it sits on top of everything and doesn't create any kind of confusion. I gave it a 2-pixel border with a border radius of 12, made it bold, and currently that container is visible. So what I want to show in this container is the text, the full text of the selected topic. So I'm going to drop a text label here. It's a little bit on the big side. I always like making them a tad smaller. And let's take a look at how we're going to populate this. So that label, which will be named label topic detail, its text property is going to be set up by a standard string called topics details. And then to add a line break here, I'm going to add the char 10. And then I'm going to select to show the topic of the current topics gallery, the item that is selected. So here we have our label named topic detail. You can see it there, we can see it here, we can see it here. And now let's get its text. Okay, so again, we have topic details as a string, character 10, which is the line break, and then we want the topic that was selected in the gallery. So here we go. You can see it here, and we can align it at the top. we want to have a means to close this once it pops up. So I'm gonna do the cancel badge, which I like. I match the color just because I can. A little bit better. All right, so let's take a look here. We have a container. I'm gonna call that CTR topic detail. And in that container, we have the close details icon and the topic itself. Because they are inside of the container, I don't need to set the visibility property to each of these. I only have to set it to the container itself. Let's take another look again at our unvisible. So I set a variable called viewTopic to false. So in other words, I wanted to, when I say viewTopic, to initially be set to false. And I'm going to set this whole container then, instead of true, to whatever that variable is set to. So not right now, it's invisible because that variable was set to false when that screen loaded. So how do I make it visible? I go to my view icon and I'm going to add a new function there to execute when I click, and that's going to be to set whatever value the variable view topic has to its opposite, and I do that by putting that exclamation mark there. So in other words, because when the screen loads, this variable view topic is set to its Boolean value of false. When I click on it, I'm going to set it to true. So let's see here, we get to see that it became visible because we had set the container's visibility to whatever value was held in the variable view topic. I'm going to do the same exact command here. I'm going to set my variable view topic to its Boolean opposite. So this is currently visible, so currently variable view topic's value is true, but when I click on that, it's going to be set to its opposite, to false. So to close that, I can click here to view this one. I click there, that works. To view this one, I click there, and that works. This is the basic functionality of the whole application. That's the core functionality of the application. Let's add a couple of other things that we are missing. I'm going to quickly add a container first, and then we need to add a couple of elements that say, hey, these are July's topics, you know, the call to action here, and this counter that tells people how many topics are suggested for this month, just a reinforcement of what they're seeing here. We'll do a quick add to container. I will not speak through this because we've done this before, so it's just for reinforcement. So we're gonna use this container to house our gallery. To do that, we're just going to cut our gallery from there. We will, in a moment, rename this container. We're gonna paste our gallery inside. And we're gonna fit it in there. Looks pretty good. I always like to use the navigation rather than the scroll bar in my galleries. And we're going to set the navigation here to about 3 steps at a time. Okay, so now this looks a little bit prettier, and we're going to call this CTR. So that's our container with its topics. At the bottom, I'm going to add 2 buttons. I'm going to speed through this because these are fairly standard build processes. So add. Okay, so I have my 2 buttons here. The first one I'm going to use not as something that is used to perform an action, but rather just to hold a title here in a kind of nice looking way. But we do want to change the text of this to change with a month. So here's the text that we're going to use. So in this particular case, the component is the button, and its text is going to be a result of pulling today's date, but only using the month and then adding the string with a space topics. So this is what I had initially done, but I realized, so I'm calling the, pulling the text to today and months and then topics. It still works, but I just realized you could change this to just the variable that is already holding current month. So you get the same result. A little bit more elegant and less complicated, and you get to reuse that variable. I'm going to put some text here, but we're not going to, I'm going to put some text in this button, but we're not going to use it in this video. I'll do a companion video to the form because I don't want for this to go too long, but just so that you see the complete section of that. So here, what we would have is, submit. So I could use this button to just submit a new topic, and that would be good enough. This is not going to be part of this video because it's essentially just building a form on top of the topic proposals data source. So that's not a big deal. But we do have to add the additional information here on the top. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add 2 text labels. And on the first one, I am going to have the call to action. And this is a relatively simple one. I do want to make this again 18. So this is the one I used. Please use this app to vote on the proposed topics or to propose new ones for the whatever month we are in and voting for space meeting. So there we go. That probably could still be a little bit smaller, maybe 16. And we want to make that semi-bold. Now here's the other one where we again want to count how many are in the current view in the current month. So the way we do that is we use an if statement here. And we basically start by filtering our submitted topics where the month matches the value of the variable current month. And if there are no topics yet suggested, we prompt people to be the first one. And if there are topics already suggested, that means the count of rows would be bigger than 0, then there are X number of topics suggested for this month. So like we see here, we have 3 topics suggested for this month. I hope you have found this video useful. If you liked it, don't forget to give me a like and to subscribe to this channel so you get notifications whenever I get some more content out. If you want to get in touch with me, leave me a comment, or these are my LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. I look forward to seeing you in the near future. And if there are some things that were not clear or could be improved, or you have some other ideas, also feel free to leave a comment. Thank you.